Tonight, we are going to sit with one of the oldest, most beloved pieces of writing the world has ever known. Psalm 23, 6 verses. A shepherd, a flock, and a God who refuses to let his people walk alone. This is not a lecture about theology, and it is not a performance of religion. Tonight, this is simply a story, a very old, very honest story about what it feels like to be tired, to be lost, to be afraid, and to discover, slowly and gently, that someone has been walking beside you all along. Before we begin, I want to ask you something. Put your phone down for just a second, or if you are already lying down, let it rest beside you, and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you right now? Which city are you in tonight? And what time does your clock say? I always love knowing who is out there in the dark with me. There is something quietly wonderful about the idea that people all over the world, in different time zones, in different seasons, under different skies, are all settling in to hear the same story tonight. Now, take a slow breath. Let your shoulders drop. If you have been carrying something heavy today, a worry that keeps circling back, a conversation that did not go the way you hoped, a tiredness that goes deeper than just your body, you do not have to solve any of it right now. Tonight, you are allowed to simply rest. Let the sounds around you grow quieter. Let your mind begin to loosen its grip on the day. We are going somewhere gentle tonight. We are going somewhere old and green and still. There is a hillside in the ancient land of Judea, and on that hillside, long before anyone knew his name, a boy is watching sheep. The night has come down slowly over the valleys, the way night always came in that part of the world. Not all at once, but in layers. The gold deepening to orange, the orange giving way to a deep and dusty rose. And then, finally, the velvet dark settling in like a blanket pulled up to the chin of the earth. The air smells of dry grass and warm stone, and the faint sweetness of wild herbs that grow low to the ground and release their scent when the temperature drops. Somewhere below the ridge, a small stream is moving over rocks, and its sound is the only sound for a long while. The boy's name is David. He is not yet a king. He is not yet a warrior. He has not yet stood before Goliath, has not yet been anointed with oil by the old prophet Samuel, has not yet felt the strange, solemn weight of destiny settle onto his young shoulders. Tonight, he is simply a shepherd, a boy doing the quiet, unglamorous, mostly invisible work of keeping a flock safe through the night. He knows every sheep by name. This is not a sentimental detail. In the ancient Near East, a good shepherd did not merely manage a herd. He knew them. He knew which ones wandered, which ones were skittish, which ones needed to be carried when the terrain grew difficult. He knew the sound of their breathing when they were calm, and the particular pitch of distress that meant one had gotten separated from the group. He knew them, and they knew him. When he called, they turned, not because they had reasoned through his trustworthiness, but because they had learned, slowly and through experience, that his voice meant safety. David learned what it meant to be known like this before he ever wore a crown. And I really wonder, if that is why, when he eventually sat down to write the most famous poem of his life, the first words that came were not the words of a king. They were the words of a sheep. The Lord is my shepherd. Not a shepherd. Not the shepherd of Israel. My shepherd. Personal. Close. The word in the original Hebrew, Ra, carries within it not just the idea of leading a flock, but of feeding, tending, nurturing. It is the word you would use for someone who knows the condition of what they are caring for. Someone paying attention. Someone who notices when one of the flock is limping, or tired, or has wandered a little too close to the edge. The Lord is that for me. That is what David is saying. The creator of the universe, the one who set the stars into their courses and breathed life into the first human form, is also the one who notices when I am limping, who pays attention when I am tired, who comes looking when I have wandered. This is not a small thing to say. It is, in fact, an almost outrageous thing to say. And yet, David says it with the quiet confidence of someone who has tested it and found it to be true. You have to understand a little bit about what David's life actually looked like to understand why this psalm means what it means. He grew up in Bethlehem, the youngest of 8 brothers, which in that culture meant he occupied the lowest rung of the family ladder. When the prophet Samuel came to Jesse's house looking for the future king of Israel, David was not even invited to the gathering. His father did not think to call him in from the fields. He was the afterthought, the one left behind to watch the sheep while the important things happened inside. But he was out there on those hillsides for years. Alone, mostly, under skies so wide and dark and full of stars that you could feel very small in them. Or, if you were paying a certain kind of attention, you could feel strangely held by them. He played his harp out there. He sang. He talked to God the way you talk to someone who is sitting right beside you, because somewhere in those long, quiet nights, that is exactly what it began to feel like. He also fought out there. A lion came for the flock once, and David killed it. A bear came, and he killed that too. Not because he was fearless. He was human, and fear is part of being human. But because when you are the shepherd, you do not get to leave. You do not get to run. The sheep are your responsibility, and something in you rises to meet that. I think he learned something about God in those moments. Not just the God of calm pastures and gentle streams, though he is that, but also the God who shows up when the lion comes. The God whose presence does not make the danger disappear, but makes you somehow able to stand in it. By the time David became king, he had been through things that would have broken most people. He had been hunted through the wilderness by a paranoid king who wanted him dead. He had lived in caves, eaten what he could find, slept with one ear, always listening for the sound of approaching soldiers. He had experienced betrayal so deep it came from his own son. He had made mistakes so serious that he spent years carrying the weight of them. And yet he wrote this psalm. He wrote it not as a naive man who had never seen the dark, but as a man who had walked through darkness so thick he could feel it pressing against him, and had come out the other side saying, he was there. The whole time, he was there. There is something I want you to hold on to tonight as you are drifting towards sleep. The shepherd knows your name, not a version of you that has it all together, not a cleaned up, polished, Sunday morning version of you. The shepherd knows the version of you that is lying here right now, the one that is tired in ways that are hard to explain, the one that has been quietly struggling with something, the one that has wandered a little and is not entirely sure how to find the way back. He knows that version, and he has not walked away. In the ancient world, sheep did not choose their shepherd. They were born into his care. But the shepherd, a good shepherd, chose them every single day, chose to get up before dawn and take them out to find pasture, chose to stay awake through the cold hours of the night keeping watch, chose to go after the one that had gotten lost, even when the rest of the flock was safe and it would have been easier to simply count the loss and move on. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. That second line, I shall not want, is not a promise that you will never feel lack. David knew lack. He knew hunger and fear and grief and loss. What he is saying is something quieter and more profound. With this shepherd, I lack nothing that truly matters, nothing that is essential to my soul going on, nothing that I actually need in order to keep walking. Tonight, whatever you are carrying, whatever feels unresolved or heavy or uncertain, you are not carrying it alone. The one who made you also knows you, and he has not taken his eyes off you. Let that be enough for tonight. Let yourself be a sheep. Let yourself be known. Let yourself be led. We will walk further together in the next chapter, into the green pastures, into the still waters, into the places that God prepares for the souls that are willing to rest. But for now, let the dark be soft. Let the night be quiet. Let the thought of a shepherd on a hillside, watching, waiting, knowing your name, let that thought be the last one that moves through your mind before everything grows still. There is a particular kind of tired that sleep does not fix. You have probably felt it before. You wake up after a full night of rest and the tiredness is still there, sitting somewhere behind your eyes, or in the place just below your chest. A low and steady ache that has nothing to do with how many hours you slept and everything to do with how long you have been running. running towards something, running away from something, running simply because stopping feels dangerous, because the moment you slow down, all the things you have been outpacing might finally catch up with you. The ancient world had a word for what David was writing about when he said, "He makes me lie down in green pastures." The word is not rest in the way we typically use it. A weekend, a vacation, a moment of leisure. The word implies restoration. It implies that something which had been depleted is being filled back up. It implies that the lying down is not laziness, not escape, but medicine. The specific medicine that a specific kind of exhaustion requires. David knew this exhaustion. He had lived inside it. Close your eyes for a moment, or let them stay soft and unfocused, resting on the darkness behind your eyelids, and come with me to a particular stretch of years in David's life that most people would rather skip over. He has been anointed king. Samuel came to his father's house, poured oil over his head, spoke words over him that felt too large and too heavy for a shepherd boy to hold. And then, nothing happened. Or rather, nothing happened the way David might have expected. He did not walk immediately into a palace. He did not receive a crown and a throne and the life that the anointing seemed to promise. Instead, he went back to the fields, back to the sheep, back to the long nights and the wide skies and the harp music drifting out across the dark valleys of Judea. And then, eventually, he was called into the service of King Saul. He played his harp to soothe the king's troubled spirit. He fought Goliath in a moment that seemed to crack the sky open with possibility. He became beloved by the people, beloved by the king's own son Jonathan, celebrated in the streets with songs that, as it turned out, made the king deeply, dangerously jealous. And then the running began. For years, scholars estimate somewhere between 5 and 15 years, David lived as a fugitive. He slept in caves in the wilderness of En-Gedi, where the limestone cliffs drop sharply toward the Dead Sea, and the landscape is all pale, stone, and shadow, and the occasional improbable waterfall threading down through the rock. He gathered around him a band of men who were, as the text puts it with remarkable honesty, distressed, in debt, and discontented, hardly the stuff of a royal army. He hid. He moved. He waited. He prayed desperate, honest prayers that he later shaped into poems, and those poems became the Psalms. He was never still. He could not afford to be. And I think, here is what I think, that the green pastures of Psalm 23 are not written by a man who has forgotten what it feels like to run. They are written by a man who has run until his legs gave out, who has spent years unable to stop, and who has finally, learned something about what it means to let the shepherd lead him somewhere soft and quiet and green. Sheep, in the ancient Near East, did not find their own pasture. This surprises people sometimes. We have a vague image of sheep wandering contentedly through rolling green fields, grazing wherever they please. But the reality of shepherding in Judea and the surrounding regions was far more deliberate than that. The land was often dry, often rocky, often sparse. A good shepherd spent considerable effort and considerable knowledge of the terrain, finding places where the grass was thick enough, the ground level enough, the air calm enough for the flock to settle and graze without anxiety. And here is the detail that matters most. Sheep will not lie down unless they feel safe. A sheep that is anxious, that senses a predator nearby, that is aware of tension within the flock, that is hungry or thirsty or uncertain, will not rest, cannot rest. The instinct for alertness overrides the need for sleep. It is only when the sheep feels genuinely secure that it will lower itself to the ground, tuck its legs beneath its body, and allow itself to be still. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He makes me, not I decided to rest, not I found a good moment and took a break. He makes me. The shepherd creates the conditions, removes the threats, finds the right ground, stays close enough that the flock can feel his presence. And in those conditions, rest becomes possible. In those conditions, the body's grip on alertness begins to loosen, and something deep and necessary begins to happen. The pastures are green. Green in a land that is largely brown and gold and the color of dry stone. Green, which means water has been here recently. Green, which means life is still possible here. Green, which means this is not the landscape of crisis or survival, but the landscape of abundance, of more than enough, of a provision that goes beyond the bare minimum. He does not bring you to barely adequate pasture. He brings you to green. I want to stay with this idea for a moment, because I think it touches something that many of us have quietly given up on without quite realizing it. We have learned to live on the minimum. We have learned to function on depleted reserves, to keep going on fumes, to tell ourselves that this is just the season we are in and eventually things will slow down and we will have time to actually breathe. We have gotten so accustomed to the running, the constant low-grade urgency, the full inbox, the list that never gets shorter, the relationships that need tending, the future that needs planning. That stillness has started to feel not like rest, but like a problem. A vacuum that something will rush in to fill. A dangerous pause in which all the things we have been avoiding might make themselves known. And so we keep moving. Even at night. Even in our sleep. Our minds keep turning. Keep processing. Keep running through the loops of worry and rehearsal and regret that have become so habitual we barely notice them anymore. David knew this pattern, not in the language of modern psychology, but in his bones. He knew what it was to have a mind that would not quiet, a spirit that had been stretched so thin by pressure and fear and the weight of responsibility that the idea of lying down in green pastures felt almost laughable, almost naive. A beautiful image for a psalm, perhaps, but not a real thing. Not a thing available to someone in his situation. And then he discovered that it was real, that it was available, that the shepherd was not offering green pastures as a distant future reward for faithful endurance, but as a present provision for a present exhaustion. Now, he brings me here now, in the middle of the running, in the middle of the uncertainty, in the years when everything is still unresolved and the future is still unclear and the people who wish me harm are still very real. The shepherd finds me a green place and makes it possible for me to lie down. There is a moment recorded in the Psalms, not Psalm 23, but an earlier one, Psalm 63, where David writes from the wilderness of Judah, specifically during one of those years of running. He writes, "My soul thirsts for you. My body longs for you, in a dry and parched land where there is no water." He is honest about the dryness. He does not pretend the wilderness is a comfortable place or that his thirst is not real. But then, just a few lines later, he writes, "My soul is satisfied as with the richest of foods. With singing lips, my mouth will praise you." Satisfied. In a dry and parched land. Satisfied. As with the richest of foods. How? What changed between the thirst and the satisfaction? Nothing changed on the outside. The wilderness was still the wilderness. The enemies were still the enemies. The uncertainty was still the uncertainty. What changed was the interior landscape. What changed was that David turned toward the shepherd instead of continuing to run on his own. And in that turning, something in his soul was met, fed, laid down in green pasture even while his body was still in dry terrain. This is the miracle that Psalm 23 is quietly describing. Not that God will change all your circumstances before he gives you rest, but that he is capable of giving your soul what it needs, even inside the circumstances that have not yet changed. Tonight, wherever you are in the running, whatever it is that has kept you moving, kept you straining forward, kept you from being able to simply be still, I want to offer you this image. There is a green place. It is not far away. It is not reserved for people who have finally gotten their lives together or resolved all their questions or arrived at some distant moment of having earned the right to breathe. It is here. It is available now. And the shepherd, the one who knows the terrain of your soul better than you know it yourself, is capable of leading you there even tonight, even in this particular season, even with everything still unresolved. You do not have to figure out how to rest. That is the whole point. He makes you lie down. The making is his work, not yours. Your part is simply to stop moving long enough to let him do it. Let your body sink a little heavier into whatever is beneath you right now. Let your muscles release their hold. Let your jaw unclench. Let your hands open. Let the breath come and go without you directing it. The pasture is green tonight. You are allowed to lie down in it. There is a difference between silence and stillness. Silence is the absence of sound. You can be in a perfectly silent room and still feel the roar inside your own chest. The thoughts cycling, the worries replaying, the mental rehearsals of conversations that happened yesterday or might happen tomorrow. Silence, on its own, does not always bring peace. Sometimes it just makes the noise inside you easier to hear. Stillness is something different. Stillness is when the interior world slows down, when the surface of the mind, which has been churning all day, all week, perhaps all year, begins to settle, the way a lake settles after a stone has been thrown into it. The ripples do not stop immediately. They move outward slowly, each one smaller than the last, until finally the water is smooth again and you can see all the way down to the bottom. He leads me beside still waters. This is the line I want to sit with tonight. And I want to start not with theology, but with sheep. Come back with me to the landscape of ancient Judea. The sun has been up for hours now, burning the color out of the sky and turning the hills a pale, washed gold. The flock has been moving since early morning, led by the shepherd along paths he knows by memory. Which ridge gives way to which valley, where the thorny scrubland thins out into something more open, where the land dips toward water. Sheep are thirsty animals. A healthy sheep needs several liters of water per day, and in the dry heat of the Judean landscape, that need becomes urgent relatively quickly. The shepherd knows this. Finding water is not a secondary concern. It is one of the central organizing tasks of his day. But here is what most people do not know. Sheep are deeply unsettled by fast-moving water. A rushing stream, a river with any significant current, a waterfall. These things frighten sheep. The sound of rushing water activates something ancient and cautious in them. They will stand at the bank of a fast-moving stream and refuse to drink, even when they are desperately thirsty, because the movement of the water feels like danger. Because an animal that stumbles into moving water, weighted down by a thick wool coat that can absorb enormous amounts of liquid, can be swept away and drowned very quickly. The shepherd who wants his flock to drink must find still water. Water that is calm enough for the sheep to approach without fear. Water whose surface is quiet, whose edges are accessible, whose depth can be trusted. Sometimes this means seeking out a natural pool sheltered from the current. Sometimes it means finding a spring that wells up slowly from the ground rather than cascading down from a height. Sometimes, and shepherds have done this for thousands of years, it means building a small dam across a stream to quiet a section of the water long enough for the flock to drink. The shepherd does not tell the sheep to be less afraid of the rushing water. He does not lecture them on the irrationality of their anxiety. He finds them still water. He meets them where their actual need is. He leads me beside still waters. I want you to notice the verb. Not he pushes me, or he commands me, or even he carries me. He leads. There is movement in this image, but it is gentle movement. It is the movement of being guided rather than driven, of following someone who knows the way rather than being forced along a path you cannot see. And the destination is not dramatic. It is not a mountaintop experience, not a burning bush, not the parting of a sea. It is water that is still, water that is quiet, the most ordinary, essential, unremarkable thing in the world, and yet precisely what the thirsty soul requires. I think about how often we go looking for God in the spectacular, in the overwhelming experience, the unmistakable sign, the moment so undeniably divine that it silences every doubt. And I wonder how many times the still water was right there. The quiet morning, the ordinary grace, the gentle sense of being led. And we walked past it because it did not look like what we expected provision to look like. David was a man who had seen the spectacular. He had killed a giant with a stone. He had heard the prophet's voice speak over him like a declaration from another world. He had felt the Spirit of God rush upon him in power. He had experienced God in the earthquake and the fire and the whirlwind. And yet in his most beloved poem, the image he chooses for God's provision is not any of those things. It is still water. There is an older story tucked inside the Hebrew scriptures that I think of when I read this line. The prophet Elijah, one of the most dramatic, most powerful figures in the entire Old Testament, had a moment of complete collapse after one of the greatest victories of his life. He had just called fire down from heaven on Mount Carmel. He had stood alone against 450 prophets of Baal and watched God answer in a way so undeniable it should have settled every question. And then, almost immediately afterward, he received a threatening message from Queen Jezebel, and something in him simply broke. He ran into the wilderness, sat down under a tree, and asked God to let him die. He was done. The fire from heaven had not fixed the fundamental exhaustion inside him. The spectacular had not touched the deepest need. And what did God do? He did not send another miracle. He did not overwhelm Elijah with another display of power. He sent an angel, twice, who touched him gently and said, "Get up and eat, because the journey is too much for you." There was bread baked on hot coals and a jar of water. Simple things. Still, quiet things. The provision of a God who understood that what this particular exhausted soul needed was not more fire from heaven, but something to eat and somewhere to rest. He leads me beside still waters. The God who can part seas knows when you need a quiet pool. I want to speak to something specific now, because I think many of us carry it, but few of us name it directly. There is a kind of spiritual exhaustion that comes not from unbelief, but from trying too hard to believe in the wrong way, from treating faith like a performance, making sure the prayers sound right, making sure the thoughts are correct, making sure the emotional experience matches what we think it should match. From running on the spiritual treadmill of doing more, praying more, reading more, attending more, serving more, and still feeling, at the end of the day, like the tank is empty, like something essential has not been touched. This is not a modern problem. David knew it. Elijah knew it. The Psalms are full of voices crying out from exactly this place. People who love God genuinely and are still desperately thirsty, who are doing everything they know to do and still waking up at 3 a.m. with the anxiety pressing down on their chest. The still waters are not a reward for the people who have gotten their spiritual life in order. They are provision for the people who are thirsty. And thirst, true thirst, is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is a sign that you are alive and in need of something that only the shepherd can provide. You do not have to earn your way to the water. You just have to follow. There is a quality of nighttime water that does not exist at any other hour. If you have ever sat beside a still lake or a calm river after the sun has gone down and the air has cooled and the last of the daylight has drained from the sky, you will know what I mean. The water becomes a mirror. It reflects the stars so perfectly that you can feel suspended between two skies, the one above and the one below, both full of the same ancient light. The sound it makes is barely a sound at all, a soft lapping at the edge, a small movement, the quiet respiration of something alive and unhurried. Everything in you slows down to match it. This is what I imagine when I read David's words tonight. Not a theological concept, not a doctrine to be understood and filed away, but a place, a real place, at a real hour, with real water that is calm enough to reflect the stars. A place where the shepherd has led you specifically because he knows you are thirsty in a way that the rushing water of your ordinary day cannot satisfy. He has been here before you. He knows this place. He chose it for you. He restores my soul. This is the line that follows the still waters, and it belongs here, in this chapter, because it is the explanation of what the still waters do. The word for restore in Hebrew is shub. It means to turn back, to return, to bring back to an original condition, not to create something new, but to recover something that was lost, to bring back what had drained away. The soul does not restore itself. This is the quiet, important admission buried in this single line. You cannot will yourself back to wholeness. You cannot think your way out of depletion. The restoration is something the shepherd does, in the places the shepherd chooses, at the pace the shepherd sets. Your part is simply to arrive at the water, to let yourself be led there, to stop at the bank and drink. Tonight, I want to give you permission, if permission is something you need, to stop performing, to stop trying to manufacture the feeling of peace and simply allow yourself to be in its proximity, to stop auditing your own spiritual condition for a few hours and simply let the water be still and let your soul be in the presence of the one who restores. You are thirsty. That is not a failure. That is the most honest thing about you right now. And it is exactly the right condition for someone who is about to be led to still water. The shepherd knows where the pool is. He knows the path in the dark. He has walked it many times before, with many tired sheep, in many long and difficult seasons. Follow him there tonight. Let your breathing slow. Let the thoughts come and go without catching them. Let the surface of your mind begin to settle, the way water settles, the way a lake in the deep of the night lies perfectly flat and perfectly still and reflects, without effort, everything above it. You do not have to do anything else tonight. The water is still. You are here. That is enough. Nobody tells you, when you first begin to follow God, that the path will curve. We imagine it differently in the beginning. We imagine something clean and direct, a straight line from where we are to where we are supposed to be, with clear markers along the way and a reasonable timeline and a general sense that things are moving forward in a manner that makes sense. We imagine faith as a kind of GPS. Input your destination. Receive your route. Follow the instructions. Arrive. And then life begins to happen. The path bends. The timeline dissolves. The clear markers give way to terrain that looks nothing like what we expected. And the destination, which seemed so certain, so close, appears to have moved, or perhaps was never quite where we thought it was. We take what feels like a wrong turn and find ourselves somewhere unfamiliar. We wait in a place we did not choose, for longer than we thought we would have to wait. We lose something we were certain we were meant to keep. We walk through a season that makes no sense from the inside and wonder, quietly and sometimes desperately, whether we have somehow missed the path entirely. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Tonight I want to sit with this line, not to explain it away, not to smooth over the difficulty inside it, but to look at it honestly, because I think there is something here that most of us need to hear, and need to hear gently, in the quiet of the night when our defenses are down and we are more willing to let truth land where it needs to land. The Hebrew word translated as paths in this verse is magal. It does not mean a straight road. It means a track, the kind of track made by wheels, or by feet moving through the same terrain repeatedly over time. It implies a path that has been worn into the landscape through use, through repetition, through the accumulated journey of many who have walked this way before. It is not a path that was planned on a map. It is a path that was made by walking. And these paths, in the geography of ancient Judea, were rarely straight. The land does not allow for straight paths. The hills rise and fall too abruptly. The valleys cut too deep. The rock outcroppings demand detours, and the dry riverbeds require careful navigation. A path in this landscape is almost always a winding thing. not because the shepherd is confused or incompetent, but because the terrain requires it. The curves are not mistakes. They are the shape of wisdom moving through a complicated landscape. He leads me in paths of righteousness, not the path I would have chosen, not the most direct route, not the timeline I would have drawn for myself if someone had handed me a blank map and said, "Here, plan your own journey." But paths that are right, paths that are leading somewhere real, somewhere good, somewhere that serves a purpose larger than my ability to see from where I am currently standing. I want to tell you about a stretch of David's life that I find almost unbearable to think about, and yet profoundly comforting at the same time. David was anointed king of Israel when he was a young man, probably somewhere between 15 and 20 years old, depending on which historical estimates you follow. He was anointed. Oil was poured on his head. The old prophet Samuel spoke words over him that carried the weight of divine appointment. It was, by any measure, a moment of extraordinary clarity and purpose. And then he waited. For years, for perhaps 15 years or more, by some scholars' reckoning, he waited while Saul remained on the throne. He waited while he was hunted through deserts and wilderness regions. He waited while his men grew discouraged and the future remained stubbornly opaque. He waited while the anointing sat heavy on his head and the crown remained somewhere else entirely, in the possession of a man who had rejected God and was slowly unraveling. During this waiting, David made choices. Some of them were good. He spared Saul's life twice when he had the opportunity to end the waiting by simply ending the king. And both times he chose not to, because Saul was still the Lord's anointed and David understood, at his best moments, that the path was not his to shortcut. Other choices were not so good. He spent time among Israel's enemies. He told half-truths when truth felt too dangerous. He stumbled and backtracked and made the kind of decisions that a person makes when the waiting has gone on too long and the uncertainty has worn the edges off their better judgment. And yet, the path was still leading somewhere. The curves were not accidents. The waiting was not wasted. Every year in the wilderness taught David something about leadership, about human nature, about the difference between the God who anoints and the God who delivers on his own timetable, in his own way, according to a wisdom that does not always explain itself. When David finally became king, first of Judah, then eventually of all Israel, he was not the same young man who had stood in his father's house while oil ran down his face. He was someone forged by the winding path, someone whose leadership would be shaped by the years of waiting in ways that a more direct journey could never have produced. The path was right, even when it looked wrong. There is a particular kind of pain that comes with the winding path, and I want to name it carefully because I think it is one of the most common and most quietly suffered spiritual experiences there is. It is the pain of not being able to explain yourself. When the path curves in ways that make no sense from the outside, when the job does not come through, when the relationship ends, when the thing you were certain God had promised seems to be delayed or denied or redesigned entirely. There is the internal suffering of the confusion itself. And then there is the additional weight of not being able to make it make sense to anyone else. Of having people ask how things are going and not knowing what to say. Of watching the paths of others seem to go so much more directly toward the places you thought you were also heading. And feeling the complicated mixture of joy for them and private grief for yourself that you cannot quite admit to without feeling ashamed of it. David wrote about this too. In the Psalms that were not Psalm 23, in the rawer, less polished poems he wrote in the middle of the waiting rather than on the other side of it. He wrote things like, "How long? Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me?" He asked the questions that the winding path always eventually produces. He asked them honestly, without dressing them up, without pretending they were not questions. And what I find extraordinary is that God did not strike him down for asking, did not withdraw the anointing, did not declare David disqualified for his honesty. The Psalms of lament, the ones that begin in confusion and grief and something close to accusation, are in the Bible. They were not edited out. They were kept and sung and passed down through generations as part of the authorized record of what a relationship with God can honestly look like. Your confusion about the winding path is not a sign of weak faith. It may be one of the most authentically faithful things about you. For his name's sake. This is the phrase at the end of the verse that I want to linger over, because I think it carries something important and surprisingly comforting. The shepherd does not lead the sheep in right paths primarily for the sheep's sake. He leads them for his name's sake, for the sake of his own reputation, his own character, his own commitment to being the kind of shepherd that he is. The sheep's arrival at the right destination is bound up with something larger than the sheep's own journey. It is bound up with who the shepherd is, with what he has committed to, with the integrity of his own name. What this means, in practical terms, is that the path does not depend on your performance. It does not depend on whether you have been faithful enough, obedient enough, spiritually disciplined enough to deserve to be led in the right direction. The shepherd leads you in right paths because he is that kind of shepherd. Because his name, his character, his faithfulness, his love is at stake in your journey. He has, in some profound sense, staked his reputation on getting you where you need to go. You cannot get lost badly enough to make him stop looking. You cannot wander far enough to put yourself outside the territory where he is willing to come and find you. The path remains right, not because you have navigated it perfectly, but because he has not let go of you. I want to give you something to carry into sleep tonight. Not an answer. The winding path rarely offers clean answers, but an image. Imagine a shepherd on a hillside at dusk. The light is going golden and the air is cooling and the flock is moving ahead of him down a path that winds through the low hills, disappearing around a bend and then reappearing further on. lower down, closer to the valley floor where the night camp will be made. From where the shepherd stands on the high ground, he can see the whole path, the curve that looks from down below like a detour, the section that seems from the inside to double back on itself, the long stretch that feels like it is going the wrong direction before it finally turns toward home. He can see all of it. The sheep cannot. The sheep can only see the next few steps, the immediate terrain, the back of the sheep in front of them. They cannot see the whole path. But the shepherd can, and he is not worried. He knows where this path goes. He has walked it before. He knows that the curve that looks like a wrong turn is actually the only way around the rocky outcropping that would stop the flock entirely if they tried to go straight through. He knows that the section that seems to double back is the path skirting the edge of land that cannot bear the weight of the flock. He knows that the long stretch in what feels like the wrong direction is the approach to the only gap in the ridge that leads down to the valley. Every curve has a reason. Every apparent detour is wisdom in disguise. You are on the path tonight, even if you cannot see where it is going. Even if the last several bends have left you disoriented and unsure. Even if what you can see from where you are standing looks nothing like what you expected the path to look like by now. The shepherd is on the high ground. He can see the whole thing. And he is not worried about getting you home. Let the winding path be what it is tonight. Do not try to straighten it in your mind. Do not rehearse the alternative routes you might have taken, or calculate how far off course you might be, or try to figure out, in the last tired hours of the day, what the curve means and where it is taking you. Just take the next step, and then rest. The path is still right. The shepherd still knows the way. And the valley camp, with its warmth and its shelter and its stillness, is closer than the darkness makes it seem. Let your thoughts slow down now. Let the map dissolve. Let go of the need to understand the whole route from where you are standing. You are being led. That is enough for tonight. Close your eyes and let the path carry you forward into sleep. There is a word in Psalm 23 that most people skip over without realizing they have skipped it. The word is through. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, not into, not around, not beside. Through. The valley is not the destination. It is the terrain between two places, between where you are and where you are going. It has an entrance and it has an exit. It is a passage, not a permanent residence. But it is also, undeniably, a real place. A dark place. A place where the walls rise steeply on both sides and the light does not reach the bottom and the shadows move in ways that make it difficult to tell what is real and what is fear, shaping the darkness into forms that frighten you. David does not pretend the valley is not dark. He does not reframe it as merely a challenging season or a growth opportunity wrapped in difficult packaging. He calls it what it is, the valley of the shadow of death. In some translations, the valley of deep darkness. In others, the darkest valley. The Hebrew word Talmaveth is a compound of shadow and death, a word that carries within it the full weight of what it means to be in a place where you genuinely do not know if you will come out the other side. And yet, into this most honest, most unflinching description of darkness, David places the most quietly radical sentence in the entire psalm. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Not the darkness is not real. Not the valley is actually not that bad once you are in it. Not I have figured out how to feel peaceful in terrifying places through spiritual discipline and the correct application of faith principles. Simply, you are with me. And because you are with me, I will not be mastered by fear. Come with me to a night in the wilderness of En-Gedi. The cliffs here are limestone, pale and ghostly in the moonlight, carved over thousands of years by water and wind into shapes that throw strange shadows across the ground. The Dead Sea lies somewhere below and to the east, invisible in the dark, but present in the particular quality of the air, the faint mineral heaviness of it, the way the silence seems to press inward from all directions at once. It is cold at night in the Judean wilderness, surprisingly cold for a landscape that burns with such ferocity during the day, and the cold has a weight to it, a texture like something physical settling over the land. David is in a cave. He has been here before, in other caves, in other nights, in other stretches of wilderness that have become, over these long years of running, almost familiar in their unfamiliarity. The cave is shelter. It is also a trap, depending on who is on the other side of the entrance. Everything in David's life right now has this double quality. The thing that protects you is also the thing that confines you. The darkness that hides you also hides what is coming toward you. His men are sleeping, or trying to sleep. Some of them lie too still in the particular way of people whose bodies have given up, but whose minds have not. Some of them breathe in the shallow, uneven rhythms of anxiety poorly managed. These are men carrying fear the way you carry something heavy that you have been carrying for so long you can no longer fully feel its weight. But your body knows it. Your posture knows it. The curve of your spine knows it. David is awake. He is sitting near the entrance of the cave, not quite inside and not quite outside, in the narrow margin between the shelter of the rock and the exposure of the open night. And he is. This is the thing I want you to hold on to. He is talking to God, not performing, not composing, not trying to produce the kind of prayer that sounds like a psalm. Just talking. The way you talk to someone who is sitting right beside you in the dark, which is exactly what it feels like to him in this moment. He is saying the things that are true. The fear is true. The exhaustion is true. The confusion is true. The anger at the injustice of it. Saul hunting him. Saul who has lost the thread of himself entirely and yet still sits on the throne while David huddles in caves, that anger is true too, and he does not tidy it up before he hands it over. And in the talking, something shifts. Not the circumstances, not the threat level, not the practical reality of his situation, which remains exactly as dangerous as it was before. What shifts is something interior, something in the quality of the darkness itself. It is still dark. The valley is still the valley, but he is no longer alone in it. And the aloneness was, it turns out, the most frightening thing. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. I want to be careful here, because I think this is one of the places where Christian teaching can accidentally cause harm if it is not handled with honesty. The promise of Psalm 23 is not that you will not walk through dark valleys. David walked through them. The men and women whose stories fill the pages of Scripture walked through them. The most faithful people you know have walked through them. The valley is not a sign that you have done something wrong, or that God has stepped back, or that your faith is insufficient. The valley is part of the terrain. It is part of what it means to live in a world that is not yet fully what it will one day be. And the presence of God in the valley does not mean the valley becomes less dark. It does not mean the fear evaporates instantly. It does not mean you walk through with a serene smile and an unshakable sense of peace at every moment. David's psalms from the dark places are full of grief and confusion and the kind of desperate, clinging prayer that does not feel victorious at all. He felt what the valley felt like. He was honest about it. And God was present with him through all of it, not rescuing him from the emotional experience of the darkness, but refusing to let him be alone inside it. This is a different kind of comfort than we often think we want. We want the darkness to end. We want the valley to resolve into morning quickly and cleanly. We want the presence of God to feel like a floodlight switched on, illuminating everything, eliminating all shadow. And sometimes it does feel like that. And those moments are gifts. But sometimes the presence of God in the valley feels like a hand held in the dark. You cannot see anything. You do not know what is ahead. You are still frightened, still uncertain, still very much aware of the shadows pressing in on both sides. But there is a hand in yours, and you are moving forward. And somehow, not through the absence of fear, but through the presence of something stronger than fear, you keep walking. For you are with me. There is a shepherd's tool mentioned in the next line of the psalm. Your rod and your staff. They comfort me. And I want to linger over this briefly, because I think it reveals something important about the nature of the comfort available in the valley. The rod was a short, heavy club, a weapon, essentially, that the shepherd carried for the protection of the flock. If a predator came, the rod was what stood between the sheep and the threat. The staff was longer, with a curved head, used for guiding the flock, for pulling sheep back from dangerous edges, for steadying the shepherd on difficult terrain. Both tools are instruments of presence. They work only when the shepherd is close. A shepherd on a distant hill with a rod and a staff is no comfort to a sheep in a dark valley. The tools require proximity. They require the shepherd to be there, in the valley, within reach, actively present rather than theoretically available. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Not your rod and your staff. They eliminate the danger. Not they light up the darkness. Not they make the valley feel like a pleasant place to walk. They comfort. They are comfort because they are evidence of presence. Because when you can sense the shepherd close enough to use those tools if needed, the valley becomes something different. Not safe, exactly, but not abandoned, not navigated alone. The comfort of God in the dark places is often exactly this. Not the removal of the darkness, but the evidence of proximity. The sense, sometimes barely a sense, that you are not walking this stretch alone, that the one who knows the terrain has walked it before you and is walking it with you now. I know that some of you listening tonight are in a valley, not metaphorically, not in the mild, Tuesday afternoon sense of the word. In the real, heavy, this is genuinely dark sense of the word. Some of you are navigating a grief that has changed the shape of everything. Some of you are sitting with a diagnosis, or a relationship that is breaking, or a fear about the future so large it has started to crowd out everything else. Some of you have been in the valley for so long, you have started to wonder if you remember correctly what the open country looks like. If there was ever really a time when the weight was not this heavy. I am not going to tell you that I understand exactly what you are carrying, because I do not. And I am not going to offer you the kind of bright, tidy reassurance that sounds right and lands hollow, because you deserve better than that. What I want to offer you instead is this. David was in the valley, not the idea of the valley, the actual valley, the actual dark, the actual years of running and hiding and not knowing when or whether it would end. And from inside that valley, not from the other side of it, not in retrospect from a comfortable distance, but from inside it, he wrote, "I will fear no evil, for you are with me." This was not a statement he made because the circumstances had improved. It was a statement he made because he had discovered, in the accumulated weight of all those dark nights, that the presence of God in the valley is real, not a feeling that arrives on schedule, not an experience that rewards the sufficiently faithful, a reality, a fact, something that was true even when he could not feel it clearly, even when the evidence of his senses told him he was alone, even when the shadows moved and the fear rose and the morning felt impossibly far away. You are not alone in your valley tonight. I know that is easy to say and harder to feel. I know that the distance between the statement and the experience can feel, in the dark hours, like an unbridgeable gulf. But the shepherd is in the valley with you, not at the entrance, not at the exit, but here, in the dark middle of it, close enough to use the rod if anything comes, close enough to reach you with the staff if you stumble toward the edge. There is something about the nighttime that makes valleys feel deeper than they are, not shallower. I am not telling you your valley is smaller than it seems. I am telling you that darkness changes the perception of depth, makes the walls feel closer and the floor feel lower and the exit feel further than the actual geography requires. The valley will look different in the morning. Not resolved, not necessarily resolved, but different, more survivable, more clearly a passage rather than a permanent dwelling. But morning is not here yet. Right now it is night, and the valley is the valley. And what I want you to do, the only thing I want you to do right now, is to let yourself feel the hand in the dark. Let yourself be accompanied. Let the presence be what it is, even if it is not what you wished it would be, even if it feels more like a faint warmth than a blazing fire, even if you have to take it on faith more than on feeling tonight. The shepherd is with you. The valley has an exit. You are walking through, not settling in. And tonight, in this particular dark hour, you are allowed to stop walking for a little while and simply rest in the valley, knowing that the one who sees in the dark has not taken his eyes off you. Let your breathing slow now. Let the valley be what it is. Dark, real, held. Let yourself be in it without fighting it, without trying to think your way to the other side, without auditing your faith for adequate levels of trust and courage. Just rest. Just breathe. Just let the rod and the staff be close in the dark. You are not alone. You were never alone. Sleep now. There is a moment in the story of God's people that has always struck me as one of the strangest, most quietly radical images in all of Scripture. Not the parting of the Red Sea, though that is extraordinary. Not the fire on Mount Carmel, though that is unmistakable. This moment is smaller than those, more domestic, more ordinary in its way, and perhaps because of that, more shocking. It is the image of a table set with care, laid with food, prepared for a guest, in the middle of enemy territory, not after the enemies have been defeated, not in the safety of a fortified city where the threat has been neutralized and the danger has been locked outside the gates. The table is set while the enemies are still there, while the threat is still real, while the circumstances that produce the danger have not resolved themselves into anything resembling safety. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. I have read this line dozens of times over the years, and it still stops me. Because what it is describing is not the removal of adversity as the condition for receiving God's provision. It is describing provision in the midst of adversity, abundance alongside difficulty, the table and the enemies, present at the same time, in the same place. And God, this is the part that stops me. God is apparently unbothered by the enemies. He sees them. He has not missed them. And he sets the table anyway. Let me take you back to a scene from David's life that I think illuminates this image in a way that no amount of theological explanation quite can. It is somewhere in the middle years, past the worst of the running, past the caves of En-Gedi, but not yet past the pain. David has become king. Finally, after all those years of waiting, he has established Jerusalem as his capital. He has brought the Ark of the Covenant into the city. He has known moments of genuine triumph, genuine joy, the satisfaction of a man who has finally arrived somewhere he has been walking toward for his entire adult life. And then his own son, Absalom, turns against him. This is the betrayal that I think David never fully recovered from. Not because he did not survive it, but because of where it came from. Not from an enemy king, not from a foreign army, from his own child, from someone he had held as an infant, had watched grow, had loved with the particular ferocity that parents carry for their children, even when, perhaps especially when, those children are difficult and complicated and capable of wounding you in ways that strangers simply cannot reach. Absalom stole the hearts of the people. Absalom declared himself king. And David, who had refused to harm Saul twice, who had always chosen restraint when violence was available to him, David fled Jerusalem. Again, an old man now, or close to it, leaving the city he had built, going back out into the wilderness that had been his home for so many years before. He went out weeping. The text is specific about this. He went out barefoot and weeping, with his head covered, and the people who were with him covered their heads too and went out weeping. It is one of the most quietly devastating images in the entire narrative. The great king, barefoot, weeping, leaving his own city because of his own son. And as he fled, a man named Shimei came out and cursed him, threw stones at him and his officials, called him a scoundrel, a man of blood, called the disaster a just punishment. David's nephew wanted to go over and cut Shimei's head off, and David said no, said, "Perhaps the Lord has told him to curse me," said, "My own son is seeking my life. Why should I not endure this?" This is a man in the full presence of his enemies. Not metaphorical enemies, real ones. One of them flesh of his flesh, bone of his bone, the child he loved. And yet, the table was still being set. Not because the enemies were gone, not because the pain was not real, but because this is what God does. This is the character of the shepherd. He does not wait for your circumstances to settle before he provides for you. He provides for you inside the circumstances that have not yet settled. He sets the table in the very room where the difficulty is still present, and he invites you to sit down and eat. I want to spend a moment on the specific elements David mentions in this section of the psalm. because each one carries a weight that is easy to miss if we move through them too quickly. You anoint my head with oil. In the ancient Near East, anointing a guest's head with oil was an act of deep honor. It was hospitality taken to its highest expression, not merely providing food and shelter, but actively celebrating the person's presence, treating them as someone worthy of special care and distinction. It was also, in certain contexts, a medicinal act. Shepherds would anoint the heads of their sheep with oil to repel insects, to soothe wounds, to protect against the small, persistent irritations that could wear an animal down over time. Both meanings land in the same place. The host, the shepherd, looks at you and sees someone worthy of honor. Not despite where you have been, not despite the wilderness dust still on your feet and the grief still present in your eyes, but as you are, right now, exactly as you have arrived. He takes the oil and he anoints your head, and the gesture says, "You are welcome here. You are honored here. You are not merely tolerated inside my provision. You are celebrated within it." When did you last let yourself feel welcomed by God? Not merely forgiven, welcomed, not merely endured, celebrated. The oil on the head is not a transaction. It is an embrace. My cup overflows. Not my cup is full. Not my cup is adequate. Overflows. The image is of abundance so generous that it cannot be contained. Liquid running over the rim. More than the vessel can hold. Provision exceeding the space available to receive it. This is not the careful calculation of minimum sufficiency. This is the extravagance of a host who has prepared more than enough, who wants the guest to know, beyond any doubt, that there is no scarcity here, that the provision is not running out, that the cup will not be empty before the meal is finished. This is being offered to a man surrounded by enemies, to a man who has walked through valleys, to a man who has spent years in wilderness and caves and the particular exhaustion of a life lived under sustained pressure. The overflowing cup is not the reward that comes after all of that. It is the provision that comes alongside all of that. The shepherd's abundance is not contingent on your circumstances being resolved. It is available inside your circumstances as they currently are. I want to speak carefully about something because I think it is one of the places where the reality of faith can feel most distant from the experience of faith. And that gap deserves honesty rather than easy reassurance. Some of you are sitting with enemies that have not gone away. A situation that has been difficult for a long time and shows no clear signs of resolving. A relationship that broke in a way that still has jagged edges. A loss that sits in the room with you every single day, present and unavoidable. The way an uninvited guest can make themselves impossible to ignore. Some of you have been waiting for the enemies to leave before you allow yourself to receive anything, to enjoy anything, to feel anything resembling the abundance that you read about in Psalms, but cannot quite locate in your actual life. And I wonder, gently, with genuine compassion for how hard this is, if that waiting is itself part of the suffering. if the condition we have set for our own receiving, the enemies must leave first, the circumstances must improve first, I must feel better first, is a condition the psalm is quietly releasing us from. The table is set in the presence of enemies, not after they leave. The cup overflows inside the difficult season, not once the difficult season concludes. The anointing happens now, with wilderness dust on your feet, not once you have cleaned yourself up and gotten your life into the kind of order that feels worthy of being honored. You do not have to wait for the enemies to leave to receive what God is offering. The table is already set. There is a particular grace that I think David discovered in his darkest seasons. And it is this: the presence of the enemy does not diminish the quality of what God provides. The difficulty of the circumstances does not reduce the abundance of the provision. The two things, the enemies and the table, can occupy the same space at the same time, and the enemies do not get to determine whether you eat. This is a kind of freedom that is almost counterintuitive. We assume that joy and grief cannot coexist, that peace and difficulty are mutually exclusive, that receiving from God is only possible once the things that are hard have been made easier. And then life gives us enough experience to show us that this is not true, that the most profound experiences of provision often happen inside the most profound experiences of difficulty, that the cup can overflow in a season that is also genuinely painful, that the table can be beautiful even when the enemies are real. David's psalms of praise were not written in the absence of pain. They were written alongside it. The gratitude and the grief sit next to each other in the text, sometimes within the same poem, sometimes within the same breath. This is not cognitive dissonance. This is the lived reality of a soul that has learned to receive from God without waiting for perfect conditions. Tonight, I want to invite you to sit down at the table, not when things are better, not when the enemies have cleared out, not when you feel more worthy of the honor, more settled in your circumstances, more spiritually prepared to receive what is being offered. Now, tonight, in whatever condition you are in, with whatever is still unresolved, with whatever is still painful or confusing or frightening present in the room with you, the table is set. The oil is ready. The cup is full to the point of overflowing. The shepherd who led you through the green pastures and beside the still waters and along the winding paths and through the valley has also, it turns out, prepared a place specifically for you to sit and be fed. And the enemies, the circumstances, the fears, the griefs, the things that are not yet resolved, they are in the room. Yes, but they are not at the table. The table is yours. Let yourself eat tonight. Let yourself receive. Let yourself be. For this quiet hour before sleep comes, someone who is being honored and cared for and provided for in ways that exceed what the circumstances seem to allow. Let the cup overflow. Let the oil be poured. Let the feast be what it is: extravagant, generous, inexplicable, given freely in the middle of a complicated life by a shepherd who does not wait for perfect conditions before he provides. Breathe slowly now. Let your body settle deeper into its resting place. Let the image of the table sit gently in your mind. Not a table that demands anything from you. Not a table where you have to earn your seat, but a table that was prepared specifically with you in mind. In a room where the shepherd is the host and you are the honored guest and the cup in front of you is already full. You are welcome here. You are honored here. The enemies do not determine whether you eat. Let yourself be fed tonight. Let yourself be full. There is a word at the beginning of the final verse of Psalm 23 that I want to hold very carefully tonight, because I think it is the word the entire psalm has been building toward. The word is surely. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Not hopefully, not probably, not if I am faithful enough, consistent enough, spiritually disciplined enough, if I manage to stay on the right path and avoid the wrong ones and maintain the correct interior posture toward God through all the seasons that are coming. Not contingently, not with conditions attached in fine print at the bottom of the promise. Surely, in the Hebrew, the word is ak, a word that functions as an intensifier, a word that says, this is not a possibility I am entertaining. This is a certainty I am declaring. This is not wishful thinking dressed in the language of faith. This is a man who has been through the wilderness and the valley and the winding paths and the table set in the presence of enemies, and who has come out the other side of all of it with a single, quiet, unshakable conclusion. Goodness and mercy have been following me. They were following me the whole time, and they will keep following me. All the days. Every one of them. The easy ones and the hard ones and the ones that have not arrived yet, and the one, whenever it comes, that will be the last. Surely. I want to tell you something about the way this psalm ends that I think often gets lost in translation. The image in the final verse is not what most of us picture when we read it. We tend to imagine goodness and mercy walking ahead of us, leading the way, showing us the path, going before us into the future. And there is something true in that image. But it is not quite what David wrote. The Hebrew word translated as follow is radaf, and radaf means to pursue, to chase, to follow with intensity and purpose, the way a hunter follows prey, the way a shepherd follows a sheep that has gone astray, the way a mother follows a child who has wandered too close to something dangerous. Goodness and mercy are chasing you. They are not passive companions ambling along behind you at a comfortable distance. They are active. They are purposeful. They are in pursuit. And the quarry, the thing they are pursuing, is you. Your entire life, from the beginning to the end of it, is being actively chased by goodness and mercy that refuse to let you outrun them. Think about what this means for the seasons when you have wandered. for the stretches of your life when you made choices you are not proud of, when you went in directions you should not have gone, when you moved away from the shepherd rather than toward him. The psalm does not say goodness and mercy follow you when you are on track. It does not say they pursue you on your best days. It says all the days of my life. Everyone, including the ones you would rather not remember, including the ones when you were not following the shepherd at all, when you were running in the opposite direction, and goodness and mercy were running after you. You were never as lost as you thought you were. You were never as far gone as the fear told you. Because the whole time, something was chasing you home. Come with me one last time to David. Not the young shepherd on the hillside, not the fugitive in the cave, not even the weeping king leaving Jerusalem barefoot. Come with me to an old man, sitting somewhere quiet, perhaps in the palace, perhaps in a garden, perhaps in one of those late afternoon hours when the light comes in at an angle and turns everything gold, and the day has lost its urgency, and there is, for a moment, enough stillness to actually see your own life from the outside. He has lived everything by now. He has been the shepherd boy and the armor bearer and the giant killer and the fugitive and the king and the adulterer and the man broken by his own sin and the man restored by a mercy he did not deserve and the father whose heart was torn in two by a son he could not stop loving, even while that son tried to destroy him. He has known the green pastures and the still waters and the winding paths and the valley of deep darkness and the table set in enemy territory. He has known all of it. He has survived all of it. And more than survived, he has found, in the surviving, something that he can only call goodness. Something that was present in places where goodness had no reasonable right to be. He picks up his pen, or rather, he settles into the rhythm of composition that has been the constant companion of his entire life. The shaping of experience into song, of truth into words that can be carried. And he writes 6 verses. 6 small, luminous verses. The shortest poem of his life, perhaps the most complete. And at the end of it, after the shepherd and the green pastures and the still waters and the winding paths and the valley and the table and the oil and the overflowing cup, at the very end, he does not reach for something grand. He does not conclude with a trumpet blast or a triumphant declaration. He ends with the simplest, most intimate, most quietly confident statement a human being can make. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Not I will visit. Not I will try to maintain my position there. Not I hope to find my way there eventually. I will dwell. Present tense, moving into future tense. Seamless. Unhurried. Settled. The wandering is over. The running is over. The caves and the wilderness and the long seasons of not knowing, all of it has been leading here. Not to a palace, not to a legacy, to a house, to the house of the one who has been shepherd and host and guide and companion through every terrain the journey has required. Home. After everything. Home. I want to spend a little time with the word dwell, because I think it is doing something important that we might miss. To dwell is not the same as to visit. A visitor stays for a defined period and then leaves. A visitor maintains a certain formality, a certain awareness of not being quite at home, a certain readiness to depart when the appropriate time comes. A visitor is grateful for the hospitality but also aware of its limits. To dwell is to be at home, to put your things down without worrying about having to pick them up again, to stop calculating how long you have left before you need to go, to settle into a place with the particular relaxation of someone who belongs there, who does not have to perform belonging but simply inhabits it. Naturally, the way you inhabit a space that has known you for a long time and keeps no record of the times you left. David is saying, I am not a guest in the house of the Lord. I am not a visitor who has been graciously tolerated. I live here. I belong here. After everything, after all the wandering and failing and running and returning, after all of it, this is home. And the forever at the end is not hyperbole. It is not the poetic exaggeration of a man caught in a lyrical moment. It is the settled conviction of someone who has tested the faithfulness of the shepherd across an entire lifetime of complicated terrain and has arrived at the conclusion that the relationship is not going to end, that the house will not close, that the welcome does not have an expiration date. Forever. All the days of my life, and then beyond the days of my life, into whatever comes after days, into the unimaginable country on the other side of time. The shepherd who led me through everything in between is also the host who is waiting at the end. And the end is a home, not a finish line. I want to speak to you now, directly, gently, in the particular intimacy of this late hour, about something that the end of this psalm makes me want to say. You have been on a long road. I do not know exactly what your road has looked like. I do not know which valleys you have walked through, or which winding paths have left you disoriented, or which enemies have been present at your table in the seasons when you were most in need of peace. But I know that you have been on a road, because everyone listening to a story like this one, at an hour like this one, has been on a road. And roads are tiring. And the night, this particular night, in this particular city where you are, at this particular time showing on your clock, the night is one of the places where the tiredness of the road is most honestly felt. The psalm does not ask you to pretend the road was easy. David did not pretend the road was easy, and his road is all over the text. The valley was real. The enemies were real. The wilderness was real. The years of not knowing how it would resolve were real and long and wearying in ways that left marks. But the psalm is also asking you, gently, through the accumulated weight of one man's whole honest life, to consider the possibility that the road has not been abandoned, that the goodness and mercy chasing you have not lost your trail, that the shepherd who called you by name at the beginning of the story has not forgotten your name in the middle of it. You are still being led, even tonight, even in this particular dark and quiet hour, even with everything that is still unresolved and everything that still aches and everything that you will have to wake up and face again when morning comes. The leading has not stopped. The presence has not withdrawn. The house, the place of belonging, the home that waits at the end of all the wandering, is still there, still open, still yours. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. All of them, this one included. This particular day, which may have been hard, which may have asked more of you than you felt ready to give, which may have left you lying here with more unresolved than you would have chosen to carry into sleep. This day too, goodness was in it. Mercy was in it. Maybe not in ways that were easy to see from the inside. Maybe only visible in retrospect, in the slow and quiet accumulation of evidence that a life lived in the company of the shepherd produces over time. But it was there. It is there. There is one more thing I want to give you before I let you go to sleep. A small thing, an image to carry. Imagine the shepherd at the end of a long day. The sun is going down the way it goes down in that part of the world. Slowly, with extravagance, turning the whole sky into something that seems too beautiful to be incidental. The flock has come home. They have walked through whatever the day required. The morning pasture, the still water at midday, the winding path back, the stretch of uncertain terrain where the shepherd's presence mattered most. They have come through all of it. They are home. And the shepherd stands at the entrance to the fold and counts them in. One by one. He knows them all. He knows which ones were tired today, which ones needed extra attention on the difficult stretch, which ones wandered a little and had to be brought back. He knows all of it. And as each one passes through, something in him, something that is not quite a word but is more like a settling, a rightness, registers there, still here, still mine, still safe. You are being counted in tonight. Whatever the day was, however far you wandered, however heavy the valley was, or how long the winding path, or how persistent the enemies at the table, you are being counted in. The shepherd has been watching all day, which means the shepherd has seen all of it. The whole day, not just the parts you are comfortable with, not just the moments that reflect well. And he is counting you in anyway. You are still here, still his, still safe. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Let that be the last thought tonight. Not a task, not a resolution, not a plan for tomorrow or a rehearsal of what you should have done differently today. Just the quiet, settled, surely grounded truth that you are in the shepherd's care, and the shepherd's house is home. and forever is a very long and very generous word. Let your eyes close now, if they have not already. Let your body go heavy and still. Let the green pastures and the still waters and the winding paths and the valley and the table and the oil and the overflowing cup settle around you like a landscape you have traveled through together, you and the shepherd, and are now resting inside. At the end of the day, goodness is here. Mercy is here. They have been following you all along, and they are here now. In this room, in this quiet, in this dark. The house is yours. You are home. Sleep now. Surely